Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of Club Fitting Chronicles. I'm your host, Josh. Joining me today is my co-host, as always, Mr. Gene. How are you?
I am wonderful, and again, my grandkids love the shout-out, so I have to give a shout-out to the two best grandkids ever, Sammy and Emma.
Well, I want to give a shout-out as well to my grandmother, Sherry. She loves the podcast as well, and she's the one who gave me the advice for the backdrop. So thank you, Grandma. So once again, if you guys have any questions, any feedback for us, don't hesitate to contact us at our email at clubfittingchronicles@gmail.com. We also are in the works of creating a Facebook and Instagram account. If you guys have any of those social media apps, if you guys wanted to ask us questions there, we will add that into the description of not this episode, but the next episode. So stay tuned for that. As far as today's episode, we got a lot of great topics for you guys. But let's go back to what we were talking about last episode. Gene, what do you want to revisit before we get into today's topic?
So we're talking about, I'm thinking I need new clubs. What are some of the telltale signs? That was the first thing that we kind of covered last time, and I just want to briefly go over a couple of them. Being inconsistent. You should be better than you're playing. You know, you're seeing things not being as consistent as you think you should be. You went from one set of clubs to another and you're playing worse. There's probably a reason for that, and it probably goes back to fitting. You play a couple of holes, you look like you're on tour, you know, and then you play a couple more holes and it looks like you've never done this before. That would be, again, a sign. My favorite, you shoot 10 under on the range, you know, you're able to develop a rhythm, but you go out onto the golf course and you can't do it because you don't play in a rhythm like that. So that would be another one of those telltale signs. Or I take a divot, I flush it, or I chunk it, or I thin it. I never know what's coming up next. Telltale signs. And then when I go to get fit, things I need to remember. They need to be analyzing what I have, and I need to hit that. And I should be comparing what I'm thinking I like with what I have. Because if I don't know for sure I'm hitting this, but I need to go back to what I've been hitting and say, yeah, I like this better than I like that. And they should be able to give you a why. If they don't give you a why, that's a problem. Limiting the number of balls you hit. You know, unless you shoot like 300, 325, that's an average score for 18 holes, you shouldn't be hitting hundreds of balls. 35 to 40 balls for a fitting, and it should be over time. It shouldn't be, 18 minutes after I started, I'm done. You should be, but hitting few balls, discussing, learning, talking, asking questions, stuff like that. And if they just want to do static measurements and that's all they want to do, run away. So those are things to remember when we're going fit, to get fit. Josh, where do you want to go to first?
Well, I want to get into fitting days at like a range or something. I'm not going to name the companies that do that, but they bring their tour truck or whatever the case may be to a local driving range and or a country club, and they let the members or the public test out their clubs. But see, my issue is with that is I feel like they're limiting them to just their clubs and their clubs only. And like we discussed in the last episode, there's obviously differences in every company. So what good is it doing you if they're just limiting you to their product and their product only? And there's only so much they could give you out of a truck, So that's what my inquiry is about. What is the difference, and what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a great topic. A lot of times when you're getting fit by a company, I would recommend never buying day one. try out some other things, because again, there's so many differences from one company to another company. And if they're not asking you things like, how does that club head feel? Do you need more head feel? Most of them, they'll never ask that question because they don't want to have to do anything. They're not club makers. They're a component company. They make the heads. They know how to glue them together. That's what they're good at. They're not good at custom fitting people unless you happen to be a tour pro. Even when that happens, my recommendation, if you're hitting a driver and it's like, oh my goodness, this is the greatest thing ever. This is amazing. Buy that one. Don't say, well, I'll order one. There's too many things that go into making a driver. Buy that one. Okay. I have had so many people over time who, I'm killing it on the range with this driver. Now, part of it is they probably developed a rhythm, but they buy the driver and they come to me and they go, I can't hit it. Why not? Well, I don't know, because I don't know what you were hitting, and I don't know how similar the two are. It's not unusual to find shafts that are totally different in this, both driver heads look the same. The shafts look the same. They are totally different. That happens. So only buy what if you hit it and you like it, buy that one. The thing you have to really understand is you're only going to be fit as good as the fitter is. And a lot of those big companies, they have lots of fitters. Now, the hardest part about fitting is there is no set, this is the way to do it. If you're working for a big company, they might say, this is the way we do it. How in tune that person is, I don't know. Couple of horror stories. I had a girl who was going to play Division I college golf. She went to get fit in San Diego at one of those really high-priced major companies where you get to go and they have the $5 million hitting areas and stuff like that. She was about 5'4" from what I remember, probably 110 pounds. A really great swing. They fit her into 1.5 inch extra long clubs, 3 degrees flat, with 100-gram shaft.
That's interesting.
And her dad came to me and said, she can't hit these. Well, yeah, of course. Nobody can. And we went through and ended up, I'm trying to bend these clubs back to standard lie angles. We put different shafts in them. We're shortening them. We're doing all kinds of adjustments to them. I think, if I remember correctly, they had to go and get another head because one of the heads snapped. It was a cast head, and trying to bend it 3 degrees was more than it cared to go. I had a Big Ten women's team come in one day, and they were got fit by a major company. They came to their golf whatever setup at the university, and they were their sponsors, and they all came in looking to make better contact because they weren't making very good contact with the ball. They all felt like they were playing worse since they had been fit, and they were going to an area teacher, one of my former students, and they came in, and within about 10, 15 minutes on working with each one, we found something that they just couldn't miss. But that wasn't something that the major company was offering. That's another problem you run into, is sometimes they don't offer something along the lines that golfers could use. For instance, I was looking online today, a players club, the heaviest shaft they were offering was 105 grams. Well, I know a lot of people, including you, Josh. I believe you're playing dynamic golds. You're playing the varying weight shafts, but
It is,
I played with a lot of people who are playing with dynamic
2.0s, and then I have dynamic
the
goals
ascending
in my
weights.
wedges. Yeah.
Okay. But there are a lot of people who make a very aggressive swing. They can't play with 105 grams. It's too light. They have tempo issues. Well, if that's the heaviest thing that they're offering, and you're in trouble. In their game improvement clubs, the heaviest thing they were offering was like 75 grams. Well, again, if you're an aggressive swinger, that's way too light.
Exactly.
And the swing weight is D0. That's a problem. I worked with an LPGA player who was played for one of the major companies, had their equipment in her bag, and we refit her driver. We made it I think it was 1.25 inches shorter. We changed the swing weight a little bit to get it up a little bit for making it shorter. And she picked up, I think it was 12 yards, making her driver shorter. Because one, she was able to hit it on center repeatedly. And number two, get into the physics of it. The weight's too far away from your hands, too hard to hold the angle. You're going to release it early. Club head is not going as fast as it can be at the ball. So again, that was from going and getting fit. But it's based on what are the parameters that the company is willing to do. I mentioned before Lee Elder, when he would come in, Gene, they know my specs. Why can't they put them on my specs? And he would bring in a set of clubs, and sure enough, 4 or 5 of the clubs were not on his specs. Well, again, they're not builders. They just put the stuff together. Lee, he's not on tour anymore. He played in 1 or 2 senior events at that time still, but it wasn't something that they were, giving him the attention that they would give like, a star of today.
Sure.
But again, they weren't on spec. I've mentioned to you before, I had a pro at one of the area resorts, calls me up one day. I am hooking my 9-iron. I can't hit it straight. He was just frustrated. And these were brand new clubs, and he had his golden ticket with all his specs on it. Can you come here? I said, well, I close in 15 minutes. After I close, I'll come up there and I'll grab your clubs and look at them. A couple of his clubs, the lofts were so strong, like 7, 8, 9 degrees strong in some instances, that it caused negative bounce, which meant every time he would go to take a divot, the club head would close, and he would just...
How does that even happen?
I don't know. You would think it wouldn't, but I've seen that probably 5 or 6 times.
That's a lot. That's a lot of difference in loft.
You would think that would be noticeable. I've had clubs come in that were 4 and 5 degrees upright from the factory. Right. And they weren't bent. They bought them at a store, and that's what they got. So, other things that you need to be aware of when you're going to those fitting things. They will always find something that works. The question is it the best? And it's hard to tell when you're only comparing to one. There isn't one company that's better than all the others. There are some that I like a little bit better because of the ability to, change or manipulate things. But there isn't one because if there was, guess what? Every touring pro would play that club. But
look at Brooks Koepka.
They all make,
he has a bunch of different clubs in his.
Yeah,
the bunch of different clubs in his bag. Varying from different brands, and you have people like Tommy Fleetwood who are, who he's sponsored by, obviously, but Brooks Koepka has a variety of different club brands in his bag, and he doesn't care. He's not he's not hooked on a contract. He wants to play his best golf. So you wonder why he's doing that, and that's exactly why. He's not limited to just one brand.
Yeah, that's true in my bag. I have the driver that we produced at through ADS Golf. I have some hybrids and fairway woods produced from one company. I have my irons are produced from another company. I have my wedges produced from another company, and then I have my putter, and it's produced by another company. I get what I need. I don't get the set because I got to have all the same. No, I need to know what the lofts are. I need to know all those things. I have to have good progressions, but I don't need to have. Now, if I buy all of them, I will have those progressions, but I might not be able to hit them all. It all depends on their philosophy. Let's see what other things. I need to understand that when I'm getting fit, it's, today in most of the major companies, they're into light, but it's not just, I want light shafts. I need the lightest shaft I can control. So that may be a Dynamic Gold S300 or, X100 or whatever. That may be the lightest shaft I can hit. Or maybe, I need an Aerotech, something. Josh, you just disappeared on me. I might need an Aerotech 95 or a 110. It all depends. But the important thing is I need to be testing those things. I need to, how long are they working with me? If they're working with me for, 15, 20 minutes and I'm self-fitting, that's probably not a great picture to be at. Any other thoughts, Josh, or questions?
So you brought up component companies, and I'm just not confused, but I want you to go into more detail. Like,
okay,
what is the difference between a component company and, let's say, a company that actually builds golf clubs?
Okay. So again, the thing you have to understand, all the major companies are component companies. They make heads. They don't make their shafts. The big companies in San Diego do not make their own shafts. They purchase shafts and they get them at, a good rate. They shop around. They're looking for something in this weight class and they'll go to this company and this company. Sometimes they'll ask them to make a proprietary shaft so that they're the only ones, so that I can't get it or somebody else can't get it. But sometimes there's problems with that also. But when you're dealing with component companies are, again, they're only making heads. The difference is when they find things that work, they don't make changes. For instance, one of my favorite companies was Sean Golf. It's out of England now. Tom was my mentor in understanding club head design, along with Clay Long. They were both, I would pick their brains and ask them questions about club head designs and stuff like that. But I play with some PXG irons, and I play with some Wishon hybrids, and I play with the Wishon fairway wood. I play with the ADS Tour Dynamic driver, and I play with the Chronos putter. But they all fit me, and the thing I love about the Wishons is he gives me some options for making them heavier or lighter. They're all, in the component world, usually they're leading the way in a lot of cases. I started making hybrids in about the year 2000. Major companies started coming out with hybrids in around 2004. Component companies generally are going to push the envelope a little bit. I know, like in the case of Tom, he has more patents probably in the golf industry than just about anybody as far as head design. But there's companies like Mura, extremely high quality, costly. It costs you about $2,000 for a set of irons. But that's where, like, if a tour pro is working with the company and he doesn't like what they're offering, and they'll go to Mura and have Mura make them. Or Epon, another really high-end company. They do fantastic work. Really challenging work, and they come out with, they have to figure out how to try to make the stuff that the major companies are producing. And then they'll come up with, well, if we tweaked it this way and this way, this would be a better head. It costs more, but it'd be even better. You can get EPON. There's Swing Science is another company. They make just really nice, basic heads. You have companies like Grindworks. Captain America, I can't think of his name off the top of my head. He was playing with Grindworks clubs a couple of years ago. Golfworks is another company. Vega. You got companies like Sub-Zero. They don't give you they won't sell people like myself or our company the heads, but they will produce things for you. Or Next Level is another one of those companies that will make, they will put the clubs together for you. You can't get them from a independent club fitter. But those kinds of companies exist for a reason, because they make really good product. And a lot of times it's a little cheaper. The thing that I would run into a lot, we offered some of the major companies stuff. But if you came in and said, I want company X's stuff, I see you carry that. Okay, we can do that. But we find out you need a different shaft. Well, you have to buy company X's clubs. It's going to cost you, say, $1,000. And we want to put this shaft in, and this shaft is going to cost you $50 a club once it's installed and with a grip. So now your clubs, you have 10 irons. So now you have another $500 to your bill because of that adjustment. If you were buying, let's say a set of with Sean irons, let's say you wanted something with some forgiveness, a reactive face on the irons, you might be into that for about $950, because you don't have to buy a set of clubs, pull out the old shafts, and put in the new shafts. I'm just buying the heads. I buy the shafts, I put them together. So there's, in a lot of cases, the component world, great place to go, because they offer you things that are as good, if not as good, better, in the cases of some of the really high-end heads, the Miuras, the EPONs. But it's an option that most golfers never explore. Well, where do you find those? So generally, you're going to find those at independent fitting centers, because they're not going to make as many sales. So I can't offer, like once Cleveland came to us and said, we really like your shop and the way you do business. We want to sell Cleveland wedges, and we'd love to put them in here. Okay, well, what's my margin if I sell one of those? I make $9 if I sell a wedge. Let's see, what are my bills for the month? $5,500. So if I'm making $9 a wedge, am I going to sell enough wedges? No. I could buy the components and put the wedge together for probably $35, $40 and sell it for the same price or even less. And I would make a few more dollars, and it's, virtually the same wedge. The only difference is the name on the back of it. Most of the time, the golf ball is not interested in the name. I've never found golf balls crawling around and looking behind to see what was hitting it. So that's something to understand.
It's a good way to put it.
The name doesn't make the ball go further. If there was a club that made it go further, everyone would use it.
Right.
I was doing some thinking, because being old, that's one of the few things I can still do. And I was thinking about, some of the major companies and some of their colossal failures. And if you're old like me, you might remember there was the C4 driver, which nearly bankrupted the major company that lived in Carlsbad and still is in Carlsbad, because it was awful. It sounded awful. It was terrible. It was a terrible driver. The VAS irons from Cleveland, where instead of the hosel coming in at the end of the club like this, it came in here. And, I remember Corey Pavin was the only person who stuck with them. Everybody else said, no, I can't hit that. I can't, it almost killed that company. Or my absolute favorite, the good old days in about 2008 when all the square drivers came out and Nike had the one that sounded like a car accident every time you hit it. You find somebody on the range who would have that, and everybody would just, first time, what was that? And, looking around, and one day the first time I ever heard it, I was at the range, and the guy behind me, where I'm not facing, had that driver. And the first time he hit that, I almost crawled out of my skin. I was trying to figure out what just happened, and it was his driver sound. So, the difference, again, components versus the major companies, there are some irons in component world that I've seen around for 5-6 years. Now, they may make some cosmetic changes and stuff, but they're not really making major changes to the irons. So, if I really like my irons and they're starting to wear out because they were forged, I can get new ones because they still offer them. Where if I have that same thing happening with a major company, I got to hope I find one, a set on eBay that isn't destroyed or something. Their life cycles, if you remember back in the early 2010 or so, 2010, there were companies that were coming out with new equipment every 3 to 4 months. And golfers were just going nuts because, they were being told, oh, this is the latest, greatest. No, wait, this is now the latest, greatest. Well, in reality, it takes about 9 months from design to getting it out in enough numbers to sell. They were making the replacement before the driver that they were replacing was being made. They were just trying to drive golfers to buy clubs, and that's their job. As a fitter, I shared before, I can honestly say I never sold anybody anything. I helped them to find what worked. And if that was adjusting what they had, wonderful. If that was making something new, wonderful. But again, if I'm going to, a center, a big major center that, is nationwide, generally speaking, they have to make a lot of cash. And so they got to sell you something. So in a nutshell, that's kind of the component world versus the major company world. Do you have any other questions about that, Josh?
I don't have any more questions about that, but we did get some questions on YouTube that we could answer for a viewer.
Sure.
One of our viewers asks, what is TrackMan and what does TrackMan do? What are the numbers mean, Gene? What are all these little components in TrackMan?
So in a nutshell, TrackMan is a radar device, and it would tell me things like how fast was the club head moving, how fast was the ball moving. At what angle did the club head come into the ball? Was it coming from left to right? Was it going from right to left? Was it coming down? Was it going up? How much spin was placed on the ball? It's going to tell me, those are probably the most important numbers. It kind of figures out for you how well you struck the ball. But in general, it's giving club fitters information, and now there's some other things that companies that are out there. But it's basically a means of getting the raw data about what's going on when the ball and the club come together. And what I would be looking at is, how can I affect those numbers? Can I get your path a little less to the inside because your clubs were so light, you were just pulling across the ball so hard because you couldn't feel anything? Or, right. If I gave you a little heavier shaft, what happened to that path? Did that path straighten out a little bit? Were you able to feel the club face, and now the club face is square versus it was open? How much loft is on the club face? When the club face head was really light, you would end up opening up the club face and adding loft. Now that it can feel the head, now you can feel that the club face, the club face is now square, and the club face may have not as much loft on it, and so you're going to pick up a little distance. So in general, that's what TrackMan, for our purposes, when we're referring to it, it's giving us that raw data.
So you brought up like fixing people's swing or giving them advice during a fit or during TrackMan or whatnot. Another question that we got is, do I get fit first or do I get my swing together first?
This is the old chicken and the egg question. Which comes first? And in my world, it was always you get fit. Because let's say I gave you, Josh, a 7.5 degree driver, 4 degrees open. Yes, they are out there. And I give you a regular shaft. And I say, okay, I want you, you need to groove your swing. How long do you think it will take with lessons for you to learn not to push it right or pull it left in order to get your lessons accomplished, to get the ball flight that the instructor is trying to get you? Forever. I would go by and I had some area pros who would call me in, when they were doing lessons, and I would look into the bag, and I wouldn't do a big, long, dive, but I would point out some things that you need, that may be a concern if they're not being able to hit things.
Right.
But the number one thing, drivers, generally speaking, they're too long. How long is it going to take for you to master that? Forever. They're too long. Tour players don't play with them that long. Why do you think you should? Some of the time, like if I'm playing with, I'm 65 years old, I have dynamic gold S300s. I'm wondering why the ball isn't getting up in the air and why it seems to go right, and I'm tired after about the 8th hole. Well, there's a good reason for that. How long at going through lessons is it going to take for me to get the ball higher? I have to learn to do something wrong in order to do that, because the shaft is too stiff for me, so I'm not getting any response out of the shaft. It's not bending slightly forward before impact. And the fact that it's going a little right, now I'm trying to steer it back to to straight. So I've closed the club face a little bit more, which de-lofts it a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Lessons aren't going to help. I need to make sure, I should at least get checked. Are these working at least with me, not against me?
Yeah.
But my recommendation is, before I go off and start firing money at lessons, I should make sure that what I have can work for me. And it's not a long process. It shouldn't take somebody very long to figure that out. Usually I could do that, watching 10, 15 swings, kind of get an idea of what you needed to have, and are these anywhere near there? So definitely you get fit first, because you're not going to, the clubs aren't going to make you swing a certain way unless they're wrong for you. Then if they're too heavy, I'm going to swing to the inside because I can't swing through the shot. It's too heavy. If they're too light, I can't feel that. And again, most people, when something is too light, they're going to swing inside. So life is easier when they're fit.
And I'm also a big advocate, and you get tips while you're getting fit. I mean, what's the worst that could happen if you're getting fit first and they give you a couple tips? That's every time I've gotten fitted, that's how it's gone. Yeah.
I grip the club this way, and I can't figure out why it's not. Well, there's a reason for that. Let's try getting our hands more in this position.
Right. And like we talked about in the first episode, it's a matter of how you get in those positions. There's not a standard to how you should swing it. I mean, obviously there's a certain, I guess, mold that people like to teach.
To a certain point.
Yeah, but there's not a perfect swing. There's not a perfect swing, right? But there is positions that you can get into that are desirable for hitting the ball straight or hitting the ball consistent, and you could hit the ball consistent with your clubs as well. So But yeah, I
the
think
other day, just real quick, I got a real quick story. It'll take 30 seconds. I was playing with somebody. He had a $5 driver and he had a $450 driver. And he could hit the $5 driver down the middle. And he could hit the $400 driver into the houses. And when he found out what I did, he asked me, why? Is it the price of the driver? And no, it's the fact that your $5 driver is 2.5 degrees closed and your $400 driver is 4 degrees open. And so that's why you got the ball going so much further right, because he was slicing the closed driver, but he was slicing it maybe 5 yards. The other driver, it was going 40, 50 yards right. And it was the equipment, and his swing was repeatable with the $5 driver. I don't think he missed a fairway, and he didn't miss a house with the other one.
That's how it goes, right? I mean, that's the goal of this podcast. Is to explain that club technology is extremely detrimental to your game, and you need to know what is right for you. You can't just pick up a club and assume it's going to be the best club for you. You can't go to a used club bin and be like, oh, this looks cool. Maybe it'll be the best club I've ever had. I mean, you can't assume that. It's possible that club could be really good for you. It's possible, but the likelihood of that happening is very slim. And that example is great. I mean, 450-yard driver and you're hitting it in the houses and you have a garage sale driver. It's just a little bit degree of difference, and it makes all the difference in your game. You're hitting more fairways. It doesn't matter if you're slicing it 50 yards. If you're hitting a house or if you're hitting a fairway, what does it matter? Right? Even if you minimize that slice to 5 yards, I mean, it changed his game completely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he didn't need to carry 25 golf balls.
Jeez, that is remarkable. Well, Gene, thank you so much for explaining that for me and the audience today. I think there's a lot of great topics touched. If you guys, once again, want to subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a comment or even an email for some feedback or questions that you may have, we'll do the same thing what we did today and answer them in our podcast to the best of our ability. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode just as much as me. Please stay tuned for episode number 4. We do upload every other week, once every 2 Fridays. So stay tuned for that. Gene, do you have anything else to add before we sign off?
Can't wait until the golf course is open again.
I know, overseed right now is crazy. There's so many golf courses closed. Yep. I have nowhere to practice other than some places in the West Valley, or even Dobson Ranch is open. But, that's still 30 minutes for me, so I'm not going to make the drive just to hit golf balls. So
it's 40 minutes for me.
All right, Gene, thank you so much. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. We'll see you guys next episode.
Thanks, Josh.
Yep, thank you, Gene. Bye-bye.